creepy Craigslist roommate. When I was 21, I transferred to a college in San Francisco. I checked out a room for rent on Craigslist. It was in a nice 2-bedroom apartment. It was cheap rent and close to campus, so it was the ideal spot. The girl who lived there was 29 and her name was Beth. She was tall and wide, had jet black hair, and wore pale makeup. She seemed nice, although a little quiet. But she seemed to like me and agreed to let me move in. So far, so good. My first night there we went out for pizza, and that's when I could tell that something was a little bit off with her. Throughout dinner, she kept telling me how much I looked like Shia LaBeouf. I didn't know what to say, so I just shrugged it off with a thanks. I mean, I look nothing like Shia LaBeouf, so it just didn't make any sense to me. When we returned home, she asked if I had seen her room yet. I said no, and so she took me to see it. Her walls were covered in posters of Shia LaBeouf. She even had printed out photos of him all over her mirror. She owned all his movies. I didn't know what to make of it. It was creepy. She had been saying I looked like him the whole night, and now it's obvious to me that she's obsessed with the guy. A few weeks passed, and I never really saw her that much. We didn't spend any time together really. She would come home from work and practically run to her room. She would spend the whole night in there. She had this creepy high-pitched giggle, and I would hear her giggling through the walls all night. I wondered what the hell she could be doing. Occasionally she would come out and talk for like 2 minutes, and she would always be slurring her words, so I suspected she was drinking a lot. Sometimes she wouldn't say anything and she would just stand in the hallway and watch me in the living room. I would turn and see her and be surprised and say, "Hello, Beth," and then there would be this long awkward pause and she would give out her creepy high-pitched giggle. It was uncomfortable being around her. She gave me the chills. One night I woke up at around 2 a.m. because I heard what sounded like the front door being unlocked. I came out of my bedroom and all the lights were off, but I could still see Beth standing at the front door. She had her face against it, and she was turning the lock back and forth over and over again. And every time she turned the bolt, she mumbled my name. Max Barker, Max Barker, Max Barker. Seeing her standing in the dark and mumbling my name really freaked me out. And it doesn't help that she kinda looks like a bigger version of the girl from The Ring. I just quietly went back to my room and tried to sleep. One night I was watching Gladiator and she stumbled out of her room and turned on the living room light, forcing me to pause the movie, which was annoying. She then asked me if I wanted to hear about her ex-boyfriend. It was an uneasy segue into the topic, but I just said sure and then awkwardly sat back to listen to her. 10 minutes into her story, she was so riled up. She was screaming at the top of her lungs about their breakup. I was worried that the neighbors were going to call the cops, and she wasn't listening to me when I was asking her to lower the volume. Amidst all of her screaming, one thing she said freaked me out. She was in such a fit and yelled, "I'll slit his fucking throat." That was a big game changer. Suddenly I had no idea what this girl was capable of. She was practically a stranger, and everything I had seen was becoming alarmingly disturbing. After a few more minutes she told me thanks for listening, and she startled her giggle. I got out of there pretty fast and went to my room to sleep. I had a pretty unsettled feeling about being in the house with her, and what was worse was that there was no lock on my bedroom door. I pushed the edge of my dresser in front of it to act as a little barricade. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my dresser scraping against the floor. Beth was pushing the door open. I turned on my light, shouting at her to stop. I could see her through the opening of the door. She was so drunk and had this insane look in her eyes. I pushed the door closed and yelled at her to go to bed. I could hear her walk back to her room, but I couldn't fall back asleep. The next morning when I went out into the hallway, my heart dropped. I saw one of her steak knives on the floor by my door. I got goosebumps all over my arms. All I could think about was her saying she would slit that guy's throat. I confronted her about it, and she said she didn't remember trying to push my door open. She said she didn't even remember telling me about her ex. I had enough. My lease was month to month, so I found a new spot and moved out. About a month after I moved out, she contacted me. I was at the movies, and my phone was off. When I got out, I turned my phone on, and to my shock, I received 40+ text messages that she had sent me over the past 2 hours. They were all just insane texts that ranged from everything from "Hi, how are you?" to "I fucking hate you." It was insane. I didn't respond, and I never heard from her again. I always wonder if I hadn't set my dresser in front of my door, would she have quietly come into my room and slit my throat? It freaks me out. Craigslist creeps. I love Craigslist. I'd estimate I've met maybe 300 people for buying/selling stuff, and for the most part, everyone was nice and harmless. However, I did run into 2 creeps who made me rethink meeting strangers alone to sell stuff. FYI, I was an early 20s female at the time. First guy, it's 2009. And I'm staying with my parents for the Christmas holidays in a small town in Florida. I'm going through my childhood room and cleaning out the closet and find a giant CD holder full of maybe 100 shitty CDs. Think Nickelback, Aqua, Chumbawamba. It's the 21st century. No one uses CDs anymore. I figured I'd try to sell the CDs on Craigslist. I put up a listing. 100 CDs from the late 90s and early to mid 2000s, mix of pop and rock. All for $35 OBO. The next day, I got an email from a guy named John around 2 p.m. He says that he's in town temporarily and that he wants the CDs. He says he can pick them up after dinner around 8 p.m. I email him back my address and number and tell him to text or call when he's on his way. 8 p.m. comes and goes. I figure I've been stood up, which happens often on Craigslist. No big deal. My dad works for a liquor distribution company and would often do demonstration nights at restaurants and bars and would come home at bar closing time. That night, he gets home at around 3 a.m. I'm in college and a total night owl, so I'm still up probably eating junk food, surfing the web, and watching horror flicks. I hear a car pull up, look out the window, and see him sitting in his car eating food. He often stops at Taco Bell on his way home and eats it in his car so my mom doesn't know he's cheating on his diet. Maybe 10 minutes later, my dad comes in and shouts my name. Pizza_succubus. There is someone here to see you. Can you please tell me why a strange man is showing up at our house at 3 a.m.? Huh? I go downstairs, and my dad says some guy pulled up in the driveway and asked for me by name. I walk outside with my dad, and this guy who is maybe mid-30s gets out of his car. He says he's the Craigslist guy who wanted to buy my CDs. My dad goes back in the house. I tell the guy it's late to just stop by, especially without texting first. However, since I'm awake, I go and grab the CDs. He then proceeds to drone on and on about why he's buying the CDs. He says he's engaged to a woman he loves very much, and all he wants to do is make her happy. He said that last week, someone broke into her car and stole all of her CDs. She was really upset, and he wanted to make it up to her. He looked on Craigslist and found my listing and was excited because I had a bunch of the CDs she used to have. The weird thing is, I didn't list any of the artists/bands because I was lazy, but I didn't think about that at the time. Anyway, he said he was getting it for her as a Christmas surprise. He said he was staying with his future in-laws somewhere nearby and that their family barbecue ran late, which is why he never made it at 8 p.m. By this point, I've lost interest and say something along the lines of, "That's sweet. Next time, you should probably call or text the Craigslister instead of just showing up." I hand him the CDs, he hands me cash, and I go back inside. 3 days later, I started getting texts from an unknown number. "Hey, I don't know my way around this town. Care to tour guide Winky Face? I could use a massage. Where can I get a massage in this town? You're Asian. Do you do massage? Would you take $40 for a 1-hour massage? Happy ending? Me, finally, who the fuck is this? Him, oh sorry. I bought the CDs from you the other day. Do you squirt? I didn't respond, obviously. I show my friends that night, and we laugh it off. Then the next day, I got more texts. I still have your address. I'm at the Bank of America near your neighborhood. I just got the $40, babe, laughing face. Only 3 minutes away. Are you home, you fucking cunt? Stop ignoring me. I'm almost there." I immediately ran downstairs to tell my dad and mom. It was nighttime, so we shut off all of the lights outside and inside my house. My mom, little brother, and I went to my parents' room in the back of the house. My dad hid behind the curtains of the front bay window with a shovel in his hand. A few minutes later, I heard him run down the front hallway, fling the front door open, and run outside. We heard some faint shouting, so we all walked out of the bedroom. By that time, my dad came back in with his shovel, his face red and his hair all disheveled. The guy came driving down our street slowly. My dad recognized the car and went running outside with the shovel, yelling obscenities at the guy. The guy peeled off and never came back or texted me again. Second guy, I was moving from Florida to DC and was going to load up my car as much as I could with stuff. However, I lived on the 3rd floor plus a bit of a walk from my assigned parking spot, so I figured I could use some help. I posted an ad on Craigslist Gigs. I said I was looking for someone to help me load some heavy items like a TV, desk, etc. in my car. Less than an hour's worth of work, and I'd pay $45 or whatever. I give the very first responder my number and address, and he shows up. He was probably 5 feet 8 inches and 350 pounds of pure fat. The sweat and smell coming off of this guy in the Florida heat was pretty nauseating, but I didn't care as long as he did the job right. While he was carting heavy stuff, I was loading lighter things. Whenever I'd go upstairs to grab another load, he'd hurry after me so he could walk up the stairs behind me. I had the door propped open, so he didn't have to worry about me needing to unlock the door for him or anything. When he'd follow me up the stairs, he made weird grunting noises like HMM, but I assumed it was because he was out of shape. Eventually, everything's loaded properly, save for some sweat smears on my stuff. I pay him, and he drives off. I go back to my place to finish loading and cleaning. I go out maybe 45 minutes later to put another load in my car, and I see his truck is back, parked across the street from mine. He's sitting in the driver's seat, looking at me. When he sees me notice him, he looks away. I walk over to his window and knock. He rolls it down, and I ask if he needs any help or if he is lost. I was confused as to why he had come back, and I knew he didn't live near me. He didn't say anything, just rolled his window back up and drove off. Okay, whatever. Of course, 5 minutes later, my phone starts blowing up. I don't recognize the number, so I don't answer the calls. Then texts start rolling in. Him, I bet you taste salty and sweet me. Who is this? Him, your pussy him, what you up to tonight? I can come back over. I get this sinking feeling it's the Craigslist guy. He had never called me about the job when I gave him my number, so I didn't know what his number was. Him, I like your pink panties. Then I realized he was looking at my dress when I was walking up the stairs. I immediately feel like a total idiot for wearing a dress that day. He then started dialing my number over and over again. I didn't know how to do the block number thing through Sprint, so I had to just turn my phone off. Later, I was with my guy friend grabbing a bite and turned my phone back on. I got another text from the guy about how he wanted to toss me around like a rag doll, tie me up, and make me beg for it. I showed the text to my friend and told him the story. The Craigslist creep then proceeds to start blowing up my phone again, so my friend answers and says he is going to cut his dick off and feed it to his dog if he ever contacts me again. I moved the next day, so I never had to worry about him randomly showing up in his truck again. Since then, I've bought and sold stuff on Craigslist, but I always make people meet me at a public place. I also stalk people's email addresses, Google Plus accounts, etc. Bringing my boyfriend saved me from a Craigslist creep. A few weeks ago, I had to fly out to a small town I'd never been to look for a place to live. I'm moving there in the fall to start grad school. My boyfriend flew with me, and before the trip, I researched all sorts of apartments on Craigslist and set up a bunch of appointments. Our first appointment was in the afternoon in this sort of remote residential area. The landlord sounded fine over email and asked me to call him an hour before the appointment to confirm that I was coming. I called, but he didn't answer, so my boyfriend and I started walking to the house and just hoped that he would show up. Maybe 10 minutes before the appointment, he called me. "Are you coming?" he asked. He sounded like an older man and had this very strange, slow way of talking, but I just thought that he was older. "Yes, we're in front of the house now." He got extremely upset. "We? Oh yes, my boyfriend's with me." "You never told me you had a boyfriend." "You never said that." It had never crossed my mind to have to tell him this information, since my boyfriend would not be coming to live with me. He was just helping me look for apartments on the trip. I told the man so, and after a very long pause, he said, "I'm sorry. It's just sometimes people don't tell me when they're married, and it surprises me. I'll see you soon." Then he hung up. I told my boyfriend about what the man had said, and he was immediately weirded out. He wanted to leave, but there were slim pickings in terms of real estate at this point, so I, stupidly, said that we had to stay, in case this place was the place. As we're discussing it, we see a man leave the house we're going to view. This man was young and extremely sketchy looking, greasy hair, furtive eyes. He took one look at us and ran out of the house to his car and pulled away from the curb with a screech. Okay. So now we're weirded out. But this isn't enough for us to bail just yet, and as we look at each other wondering what to do, the landlord arrives. He's in his 50s, very tall, and very strong looking. His eyes are completely blank and empty of warmth or emotion. He slowly walks up to us and says, "I'd shake your hands, but mine are dirty." "What from?" my boyfriend asks. "Work," is the flat reply. He asks us a lot of questions about me, completely ignoring my boyfriend. The entire time he stares into my eyes without blinking. What am I going to school for? What other places am I considering for living? Is my boyfriend moving to this town too? I try to give answers that are as vague as possible. Meanwhile, my boyfriend asks the landlord questions of the same kind, which he refuses to answer. Then he says, apropos of nothing, "Let me show you the basement." At this point, I should have noped out of there, but I didn't. I kept thinking this was an eccentric old man from a small town, we're city folk, and that we were just feeling paranoid. My boyfriend, on the other hand, wanted out of there, but he followed us as the man led us to the back of the house, away from the street, to this sort of detached shed. He opened the door and we saw that there were stairs leading down into utter darkness. He flipped the switch at the top of the stairs and the light didn't come on. Normally the response for this is, "Oh shit, the light's out," or something like that, but he just said and slowly walked down into the darkness. Then he stood there, without moving, in the dark, and said, "Aren't you coming down?" "There's nothing to see if the light's out," says my boyfriend. The landlord just stands there for a long time, then slowly walks up the stairs and closes the basement door without saying anything. He took us into the house. Weird and increasingly creepy things ensued. The front door, the only exit to the house, locked automatically, and when my boyfriend tried to fiddle with it, the man got upset and told him to leave it alone. He managed to get it open secretly, though. The man kept trying to box us into small rooms and, according to my boyfriend, kept reaching his hands into his pockets, only to take them away when he caught us looking. On Craigslist and in person, the man claimed that there was a grad student already living in the house, but the evidence of that seemed deranged. There were neat piles of generic textbooks on the table, but not other things a 20-something might read. There was a bowl of fruit on the table, but no other food in the fridge or pantry, or utensils. There were maybe 3 t-shirts in the closet. This supposed grad student wasn't out of town, but the landlord couldn't say what school he went to or how long he'd been renting the house. Finally, the man showed us every single room in the house but one. This one he refused to open, claiming it was just the attic and we didn't need to see anything up there. He gave us several reasons when we inquired. It was unfinished, there was furniture up there, it would smell bad. This last one I believed, because standing near the door, it smelled terrible. Finally, we made our excuses and bolted out of there. The man walked us out, pretended to go to his car to leave, and when he thought we had turned the corner, slowly sauntered back into the house. My boyfriend, fixated on the idea that there was something wrong with this guy, Googled the man that night. We found out 3 things: that he was a pillar of the community, known by a lot of the townspeople, that there was no evidence of him owning or managing a real estate company, as he claimed on Craigslist, and that he had listed his home address as the very house we had been touring, the house where the grad student lived. So that was the creepiest thing that ever happened to me. Never try to sell clothes on Craigslist. Again, like my other posts, I'm no writer/storyteller. Please bear with me. I have a very stable job and a very good one at that. But sometimes you need extra money, right? I am currently moving into a newer, bigger, and nicer apartment, so I've been putting down payments and using money to move. By no means am I broke, but it's nice to earn some extra cash. I thought of selling some clothes that I never wear. I've already donated a lot of older clothes to the Salvation Army, but for the clothes I never wore and that are worth some good cash, I decided to sell them over Craigslist and Let Go app. The Let Go app has never failed me. Craigslist, well, I've never tried it before, but my friends have had some great experiences. I was trying to sell a very cute, short-sleeved, black and white flower dress for $12. I put my number down so I could just talk to people directly since I don't use my email too often. Side note, I posted a picture of me in the dress that my friend took, not showing my face, and with a blank white wall background behind me. I got a text a couple of hours after I posted the dress. Here's how the conversation went. Stranger, hey, I saw your dress on sale. Is it still available? Me, yes it is. Stranger, it's kind of hard to see the dress in the picture you have posted. Do you have any more pictures of you in the dress? I have sent a picture of the dress on a hanger. One picture close up for detail, one to see the full dress. Stranger, I asked for pictures with it on. I'll just look at the ad tomorrow. I never responded. It was very alarming to have someone talk to me like that. Why would someone want to see the dress on? I mean, I guess I understand. But really? 2 days later, I got a weird phone call at 7:05 a.m. By the way, this was my off day, and I usually keep my ringer on because I'm always on call. To see that it wasn't working, and an unknown caller, I was pretty pissed, so I let it ring. They call again right after. I sighed and cleared my throat to answer. Me, hello? A raspy, garbled man's voice answered back to me. Stranger, yes hello, are you the one selling the dress? Me, I am, yes. Stranger, I'm calling for my wife, I have some questions. In my head I'm like, but I go with it. Stranger, my name is Mark, and yours? I gave him my name, but he failed many times and almost made me think, dude, am I being prank called? It was pretty frustrating because I told him and spelled my name about 20 times. We get over introductions and he gets into the questioning. Mark, is this a fake dress? Me, it is. Mark, can this be worn as a fancy dinner dress? Me, it can be. You can dress it casually or dressed up. Mark, okay. How tall are you? Me, I'm 5 feet 3 inches. Mark, okay, so my wife's pretty short and around your height. Do you wear a bra with the dress? Me, them. She can wear it with or without. Mark continues to push if I've ever worn a bra with the dress. I get short with my answers. Mark, where are you right now? I feel like I've woken you up. Me, I decided to lie, to cover myself. Yes, I'm at a friend's currently. Mark, a girlfriend? Me, a friend. I'm just not home, okay? Mark, but did you sleep in the same bed as her? Me, can we move on? I'm not home right now. His phone cut out. He calls back a minute later. Mark, sorry, my phone died. So anyways, what size cup are you? Me, excuse me? I don't feel comfortable answering this. Mark, B or C? Me, I'm not answering this. Mark, you look big-breasted, very gifted. My wife has an ass, do you? Me, I don't want to answer this. You're making me feel uncomfortable. I'm going to hang you. Mark, but does the dress ride up your back? When you walk, does it show your ass? I hung up. He decided to call me over and over, and it's not like I can block his number because his number was unknown. By the 20th call, I answered to tell him off. Me, listen, I don't feel like sell Mark. You know, I know where you live. I want that dress. I hung up and cried. I didn't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I would understand if a guy wants a dress for his pleasure, sexual or not, but at least tell me and not act like his wife needs one. Or does he have a wife? Why couldn't she call me herself? I don't know. I have so many questions. I'm legit scared, and this number won't stop calling me. I even got an email that's not related to this about a guy named Mr. Anonymous asking for smelly old flats. Is this normal for Craigslist? To the man who keeps calling me about my dress, please, let's not meet. Crazy Craigslist Lady. Hi, my name's Tom. I live in the St. Louis area, and this is a horror story about something that happened to me that almost fucked up my life forever. When I was 21 years old, I broke up with my first ever serious girlfriend, who I had been together with for 8 months. Needless to say, I was devastated. I fell into a deep depression, and I began abusing painkillers and Xanax heavily, and I began looking for any chick I could find to rebound with. I ended up looking in the personal section on Craigslist, and I found an ad for a girl named Stephanie. I began talking to her, and I arranged for her to come pick me up on the night we had intercourse that night, and decided to make it a regular thing. She was an older lady, about 35, and a bigger girl, but she had her apartment and enough money to keep me loaded on as much drugs and alcohol as I wanted. To be honest, I kind of used this lady and used her as my sugar mama, for a better lack of a word. After a while, she grew attached to me and started to want a more serious relationship. Eventually, she started dropping hints about wanting to get married. She said she wanted to do this to help me out so she could get me on her insurance so I could get help for my drug and alcohol problem, which I refused to consider. One day we got into a big argument, and she told the police that I had been abusing her and got a temporary restraining order on me. A week after she did this, she called me crying her eyes out, saying, "Please forgive me, I love you," and all this other stuff, and said she wanted to come to pick me up, buy me some dope and alcohol, and get me something to eat and be the addict I am. I, of course, accepted. From the moment she picked me up, I noticed that she was acting kind of odd. She was usually really talkative and was always on my ass wanting to talk to me about this and that, but on this day she was oddly quiet. When we got back to her apartment after I walked in, she immediately pushed me on the couch, pulled my pants down, and began giving me head. Then she climbed on top of me and began riding me, and she seemed angry when I didn't come inside her. I had been getting bad vibes off of her the whole night, so after this happened, I immediately asked her for a ride back home, which she quickly agreed to do. After I got dropped off at the house, I went inside and sat down with my sister and watched some SpongeBob with her. About 10 minutes after I was home, I got a call on the phone. I picked up the phone, and to my surprise, a lady on the other end said, "This is the St. Louis County Police Department. We're going to need you to come outside to talk to you." I ran downstairs and hid my weed and my pills, and then walked outside to figure out what the hell was going on. When I walked outside, there were about 7 different cops on my porch, and they were all pointing tasers and guns at me. One of them hit me in the back of my leg with a nightstick and put me on the ground, and I was handcuffed. The cops then talked to my mom and got permission to go inside the house, where they took a drug dog and began doing a thorough search of my room and my basement area. None of the cops on the scene would tell me what was going on. Whenever I would ask a question about why were they there, they told me I would have to talk to the detective at the station. When I got to the police station, I had a bombshell dropped on me. This lady had accused me of kidnapping her and raping her. She told the police that she had come by my house to return some of my stuff because we had just broken up, and that I had come out holding a knife to her throat and forced my way into her vehicle, took her back to her apartment, and raped her repeatedly. Thankfully, I remembered that we made a couple of stops on the way to her apartment. She had gone inside a gas station to get a couple of packs of cigarettes with me, so there was no way that I could have kidnapped her. The police still swabbed my dick for DNA, and they also took my clothes for evidence, and I was forced to spend the night in the St. Louis County Jail wearing nothing but hospital scrubs. I was released the next morning, but my ordeal was far from over. This lady began constantly stalking me. She would call me every night at odd times from blocked numbers and either cry into the phone or just beg to talk to me. I also began seeing her vehicle quite a lot in the neighborhood, even though she lives nowhere close to me. I called the police about this a couple of times, but they didn't seem to care. They told me I would have to go get a restraining order on her to make it stop. I wanted nothing to do with the court system, though, because I have a criminal record, and I just decided to ignore her, and I hope that the problem will go away. After a couple of months, she finally did stop bothering me as much. However, to this day, sometimes I get calls at 2 or 3 in the morning from blocked numbers. And every new girlfriend I get, she messages them on Facebook and tells them how I raped her. The moral of the story: be careful who you meet online, whether you're a guy or a girl. All it takes is one crazy person to completely ruin your life. Craigslist creeper. Not too long ago, I put up a post on Craigslist asking to either sell or trade my fish tank for a smaller one. I put in my phone number as the contact source and asked to text only. After a couple of hours, I got a text from someone willing to trade. We agreed to meet at a Walmart in a couple of days when we were both free and do our trade. During those days, the guy kept on texting me, involving me in small talk. He asked me about my name and where I worked, etc., and I, being foolish, answered his questions. I use Craigslist often, and I had never really had a bad experience with anyone, so I never really thought this guy was weird. I saw him more like friendly. I told this guy what car I drove and what college I went to, again, never really stopping to think what kind of info I was giving a total stranger. When the day came to meet this guy, he told me he could only meet me after 10 p.m. I thought that was odd, but agreed to meet him anyway, since my poor fish were already stuck in a 5-gallon jug. So me and my boyfriend drove to Walmart at about 10:15 and got there in 20 minutes. The guy texted me and said he was already there in an old yellow Camaro. I replied saying, "We are here too," in a gray asterisk. He then texted me and said, "Who are we?" At that moment, I realized something was off with this guy, and I replied by saying my husband and me. That was a lie, but I felt he should know I wasn't alone. He never responded after that text. My boyfriend and I went around the parking lot a couple of times looking for the yellow Camaro, but we never found it. I tried calling the guy, and he ignored my calls. We decided it was best to just leave. I don't know what would have happened if I had met this creep by myself, or even with my BF there, but I have a feeling it would have not been something good. I removed the post from Craigslist at night and saved the creep's phone number just in case he tried contacting me again. A couple of weeks later, I got a text from several different phone numbers asking about the tank. I never responded to anyone because I believed it was the same guy since I for sure deleted the post immediately. I hope he can't somehow track my phone. And of course, I'm not using Craigslist anymore. My Craigslist roommate makes me the subject of a mental breakdown. About 2 years ago, I moved into a new apartment. The walls were very thin, and because of the fire safety laws in my city, my bedroom had one window, which led into the living room, and none with outside access. The window will be important later. It was 3 bedrooms, one for me, one for the master tenant, and one spare, which at the time was rented out by a pretty friendly guy. Well, the friendly guy had issues with his work visa and had to move back to Canada last minute, leaving us about 2 weeks to find another roommate. Our quickest and easiest option was Craigslist. Due to my work schedule, I had no part in the selection process, but was content when the new roommate moved in a little later. He seemed a bit off, but friendly. He was a very tall, large guy, but pretty quiet, and not someone I wanted to go out of my way to hang with, but was okay to be around and be cordial with. About 2 weeks into his move-in, the master tenant left for Hawaii, leaving him and me alone in the home for the month-long duration of his stay. For the first few days, things are normal. All of a sudden, about 4 days into the trip, I am woken up at about 8 a.m. to a frantic knocking at my door. My roommate, we'll call him Kyle, is standing there when I open up, looking frazzled. He looks me dead in the eye and says, "So do you want to tell me what went on last night?" I was shocked and confused because I had come home from work at about 9 p.m. and immediately showered and went to bed. I explained this to him, and he tells me that he heard me screaming and arguing with someone in my room, that he saw me in the side alley out the window, arguing with our landlord, whom I'd never even seen at that point, that he heard people coming in and out of our house. I tell him no way, none of that ever happened. After staring at me for a little longer, he leaves and doesn't bring it up again. The next morning, I woke up to the same thing. This time he says he saw me arguing with my boyfriend, I was single at the time, had seen me talking with our other roommate, who's in Hawaii, and asked me for the badge number of the officer I had spoken to, since he had seen me talking to a bunch of police as well. This time, I get angry and more or less tell him to cut this shit out, because I'm not doing anything and don't know what he's talking about. He gets a weird look on his face and says I think I had a seizure in my sleep. The next time it happens, call an ambulance. And leaves for a bit, only to start knocking again about an hour later, and when I open up, Kyle repeats the same story verbatim. This happens once more before I tell him to leave me the fuck alone and leave for work. I go to work as normal, and I am reluctant to return that night, but am too tired to switch to an alternate location. Big mistake. At about 1 a.m., I wake up to slamming doors. Kyle is pacing back and forth between his bedroom, the living room, and out the front door. Walking in and out of each room, turning the lights on and off, mumbling angrily, and slamming the doors. I can see his figure pacing back and forth through the frosted window in my room that leads to the living room. Since my room is dark, he cannot see inside. Suddenly he screams, "I can't live like this. Why are you doing this to me?" I think he's on the phone and don't respond. A few moments later, He screams my name repeatedly, and I realize he's directing it towards me. I knew I had to get the fuck out of there, so I very quietly creep out of bed and start getting dressed and packing a bag of clothes for work in the morning. I'm almost done when he screams, "I hear you," and charges over to my room, slapping the wall next to my door, but not touching the door itself. I look towards my window and see his shadow lean all the way forward, pressing his ear against the glass. I was fucking terrified and sat completely still, unmoving. He eventually screams my name again and moves away from the window, and I hear him start pacing between rooms again. Now, my shoes are kept on a rack outside my door and not inside my room, so I know that when I leave I'm going to need a moment to put them on. I decided to wait until his pacing took him out the front door again, at which time I planned to grab my shoes, put them on, and run. As I'm formulating this plan, the pacing stops. He screams, "Do you want to fucking fight about this? Come out right now and we'll fight. I swear to God, I'm a very small, 5 feet 0 inches girl, and this guy is easily 3x my size, so I am not looking to fight, thanks." After a few minutes, he turns off all the lights, and I hear the door to his room open and close, followed by silence. I wait for a moment to be sure I can't hear any movement and then decide to take my chance. I took a breath and pulled my door open quickly. I step out and grab my shoes before I look up a second later and see him standing shirtless, with just a pair of boxers and socks on, in the dark of the hallway, his arms hung slightly outward in an awkward position. He says in a low, calm voice, "Ma'am, we need to talk." That was a hard no for me, so I grabbed my shoes and ran out the door with them in hand. I run about a half block barefoot before I stop to put them on. When I look back, he is standing in the porch light of our front door, watching me run but not moving. Luckily, I had a friend who lived 2 blocks away, and I had their spare key, so I let myself in and crashed there for the night. That's where I stayed for the next week or so while we worked things out with the master tenant, and Kyle agreed to move out within the week. He says he doesn't remember anything that happened or wasn't sure if it was real or not, but if I said that's what went down, then it must be real. The day Kyle left, he sent me a photo of the house keys sitting on the table and said I'm out, nothing else. I take a friend over there with me to scout it and ensure that he has left. When we get there, we discover that not only had he left a ton of food and furniture, but he had ripped all of the fire alarms out of the ceilings. He had unscrewed and removed the deadbolt to the front door and left them lined up neatly on the front table. We then realized that my front door could only be locked by using a key from the outside, and it had been locked when we arrived, meaning Kyle still had a key. We called a locksmith immediately. Even after changing the locks, I was still terrified to stay there alone afterward, and never went to sleep at night without barricading the doors with chairs and other furniture. To this day, I still fear for his safety. He was psychologically unstable, but also wonder what could have happened if I hadn't been as lucky as I was. Creepy Craigslist disabled man. This happened last year around this season while I was broke and struggling to make ends meet. I had just moved out and didn't want to resort to going back to my parents. Anyway, I was so desperate I was looking on CL for caregiver/housekeeping type gigs just to make quick cash while I looked for an FT position. After responding to several, I got a bite back from a man who had advertised as a disabled man who needed help with his morning and evening routines since he had a bad back. As a past caregiver, I thought nothing of his request to help with bathing and dressing since I knew it could be difficult for some. After chatting on the phone and coming to the conclusion he was nice and normal, I proceeded to head over to his townhouse late one night to help him with his nighttime routine. He lived a bit out of the way from me, but I was desperate and didn't mind. He even said I could spend the night since he'd need me in the morning anyway. Once I got there, he was a decent-looking man in his late 30s or early 40s with a cane. He paid me $200 up front for the expected nighttime and morning routine the next day. He explained he was ex-military and had back surgery recently. Things started to get weird once he offered me some wine and commented on how cute he thought I was. I should have seen that as a big red flag, but again I was super poor, but I didn't want to cheat him, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt. He then led me to his bedroom where he got undressed for his evening shower. I was horrified since I saw that he already had a giant erection and wanted me to lather him up. He asked if I wanted to take my clothes off and I declined. He responded respectfully. However, he did touch my butt when I bent over to pick something up for him. I should have run out right then, but I was waiting for the right moment. After quickly giving him the most unsexy shower in the most platonic way I could, he got out and said he was heading to bed but didn't want to wear any clothes. The guest room where I was to stay was right next to his, and though I was tired, I was still pretty on edge. My gut instinct was telling me to get the hell out of there. The issue was that we were on a 3-story townhouse, and we were on the top floor, and he had installed baby gates on each floor so his cat wouldn't run away. Also, he had turned off all the lights on the lower floors so it was pitch black. For me to get out, I'd have to pass his room. I quietly arranged my stuff in my purse while I heard his TV blaring, and to my horror, I saw him walk swiftly to his bathroom without his cane. I realized he was not as disabled as he had told me since he had previously put on an act as if he couldn't walk without it. He also still had his heart on and was holding a giant bottle of lotion with him. As quickly and quietly as I could, I fled and ran like hell out of the room while he was in the bathroom and jumped like an Olympic sprinter over the cat gates down the dark stairs. As I threw the front door open to run to my car, I heard his house alarm go off. I got into my car as fast as lightning, my heart beating like crazy. I immediately got phone calls from his number, and every car that trailed me had me terrified until I got out of there. Finally, after a 2-hour drive, I was back to my place and grateful I was out of there. Who knows what could have happened if I had stayed overnight, but I didn't want to stay to find out. The Creepy Clown Guy, another Craigslist story. Okay, so I've posted on this sub before and I was just thinking about creepy encounters I'd had, and it struck me that this one probably qualifies as kind of creepy. Hopefully, I'm right. This happened about a year ago now. I am a college student and I was forced to move out on my own, which I didn't mind. But that meant finding a new roommate, which can be a daunting and scary experience. I've had a few weird encounters, but I think this one takes the cake. I posted on Craigslist looking for a bedroom in a shared house or apartment for $300 or less, and in my ad, I mentioned please no phone calls, only texts or email because I find being on the phone with someone I haven't had a chance to size up an uncomfortable situation. I'm just awkward, I guess. Anyway, I got a call from a dude who didn't read the no calls part, which I mentioned because this type of phone call was exactly the reason I don't like to talk to strangers on the phone. At first, he was just pleasant and normal and told me he had a room available and relevant information like that. We started to talk about when and where we'd meet, and he started going on tangents about random stuff. I'm a combination of too interested in deep conversation and too awkward to end the call when it started to get weird, so this call went on for 2 hours and we talked about the meaning of life and all kinds of weird shit. Honestly, this should have been the red flag, and I shouldn't have met him. Of course, I also should have grown a pair and told him I needed to leave. So, he wants me to meet him at his place and show me the room. I've since learned that you should insist on meeting in public first. I got to his neighborhood and it was run down on a level that made the ghetto I grew up in look nice. Saggy front porches, hot cracked concrete, sad people with old beat-up Lincolns. You get the picture. His house blended right in. The yard was seriously overgrown and the front door didn't work. So I went around the back, and just looking at the guy standing in the doorway and seeing the kitchen behind him was enough to make me realize I just wanted to leave. No way in hell. The guy in the doorway was a man with a sort of clown-style afro. He was leaning on a cane on his right side. His eyes looked crazy and the house smelled musty from 10 feet away. Again, I'm a coward, so instead of trusting my gut, I go inside and I'm polite, thinking it's okay. It'll be over in 20 minutes and I can get the fuck out. I don't know what made me think this man who had a 2-hour conversation with me on the phone about life and philosophy would let me get away that easily. He took me up a flight of creaky steps into a small bedroom with no door and a mattress on the floor. I thought no way in hell would I live with a 40-something man. I was 19 and female, and no door in my bedroom, but it was a moot point because my mind was made up before I even saw the room. I wouldn't have lived there for free, let alone for $200 a month. Things got weird. He tried to hold me hostage with conversation again. I think he was lonely. He talked about how some of his family were millionaires. He might have been delusional. The whole story seemed made up. Then he told me about an 18-year-old girl that has also checked out the room and tried to fuck him, and told me about how his mom hated white people. He was black, I was white, and it sounded like he sympathized with her. Obviously, that was super uncomfortable. Eventually, I was able to find a break in conversation and plucked up the courage to make up an excuse to leave. I was never so happy to leave a place in my life. I don't know that he was necessarily a rapist or anything, but he gave me the fucking creeps. Creepy phone call with the weird Craigslist dad. Not sure if this belongs here, but years ago when I was about 13, I don't remember my age exactly, but it was around middle school, I made a post on Craigslist advertising babysitting services as a way to make some money. The morning after I made the post, I got a phone call, no number, from a man supposedly interested in hiring. As soon as I heard his voice, I got an anxious feeling. He was whispering/talking very low and kind of slow the entire time. It was extremely off-putting. Sounded like he was middle-aged. So we exchange hellos and he says what he's calling about and asks what I'm charging, asks my name, which he would repeat over and over throughout the convo, just added to the strangeness, age, other details, etc. So anyway, he says he has a young son for whom he needs a babysitter. Then he begins asking me about my experience, and then strangely diving into overly lengthy descriptions of his own life. I don't remember the details of the conversation, but I do remember one thing he asked extremely clearly. Now, says my name, my son, sometimes he likes to touch himself, that wouldn't bother you, would it?" in his creepy, slow, low voice. I just remember being filled with anxiety at that and wanting to hang up immediately. It was just sort of beyond TMI. His voice and tone made it a lot worse. He sounded serious, but at this point, I was partly convinced this was some sort of a prank, and I was almost certain he didn't have a kid. I had no idea how to respond to that, and even though this was on the phone, me being a stupid and, at that point, a petrified 13-year-old kid, I just responded with no. And I'm sure he realized how nervous I sounded because he just kind of gave a low little chuckle and continued, because you know how little boys are. Honestly, a lot of the details of that convo are blurred, and it went by fairly quickly. I just remember kind of nodding and yes my way to the end when he asked my availability and said he would give me a call back. He ended with "Okay, thanks, my name," with a little chuckle and hung up. I can't remember whether he gave me his info or not, but I am pretty sure he did not call back. I do remember jumping onto my computer and taking my ad down as soon as that convo ended. I felt like complete crap after that phone call and wondered whether that was a normal discussion for an adult to try and have with a potential child babysitter. I mean, it's not, right? Glad I never met this dude. Terrible, terrible vibes just through the phone.